Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
I am doing incredibly well. How about you?
Excellent. I am doing okay. May I ask you please to tell us your name?
Sure, I'm David Seidl.
Excellent. And David, will you share a little bit about yourself? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Absolutely. I'll start with who I am today because that kind of influences where I go, and then I'll tell you how I got here because I think what you've expressed in a lot of your videos is the power of stories, and I love stories, and they're what I tell myself and what I tell others about how I got here because it makes sense to me. So today, sitting here, I am the Chief Information Officer and Vice President for Information Technology at Miami University. And we always joke that this is the Miami in Ohio, not the one in Florida, and we don't have any palm trees here. Occasionally people will say, "Are you sure?" And we look outside and we say, "Yeah, we're pretty sure about where we're at."
How did the university come about the name the Miami University? It's such a unique name.
It's actually named after the Miami tribe. And so this is part of the tribal territory. And one of the really cool things about being here at Miami is that the tribe still operates here and in close partnership with the university. And one of the things I love is that my IT group gets to work with them reclaiming their language and reclaiming their history. So they're actually actively going through historical materials to pull words back out and building their language back. And if you could see the pride that goes with that when they greet you, when they share their words with us at meetings, and the way that the tribe engages with Miami, it is completely unique in higher ed in my experience, and I love it. And we get to work with them, and it's a delight.
Excellent, excellent, very good. And thank you for the history lesson. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You were telling about yourself.
That's fine. I'm a history geek at heart, so that makes me very happy. Getting to be here was an interesting path. I tell people I started off, I'm the child of two librarians. And for most of my adult life, I have joked that it's being raised by wolves, but much quieter. And I was probably fated to be a bit of a geek. And if I roll back to a moment when I was a teenager, I got a unique scholarship. I got a scholarship to the internet. In my little hometown up in Michigan, that meant that I got access to college user account and dial up and able to go on campus and log in and explore GopherNet and very antique technologies now as a teenager. And that led me down a path that took me into technology. And along my way, as I played online and learned and made friends around the world in a way that I would not have been able to in a small town in Michigan, I met people from around the world, but I also made connections. And when I applied for college, I applied for a scholarship program. And that program had a requirement for a letter of reference. And a friend of mine from online said he wanted to offer me a letter of reference. Now, it turned out he was a captain in the Canadian military. And he sent me something that my scholarship committee had never seen before. He sent an email letter of reference for online leadership via email. Just blew their minds. They said, "We don't know what you're going to do here, but it's going to be interesting." And that got me into college, and I got college paid for, which changed my life.
Right.
And I did my undergrad, and I got done, and I encountered some health problems, and I got a call from the institution after I graduated, and I'm sitting there unsure I will ever work again in my life. And they said, "We'd like to offer you an assistantship, and we'd like to pay for you to go to grad school." And I paused because I didn't know if I could work, and I didn't know that I could complete any further education. And they thought that I was pausing to think it through. And they said, "If it would sweeten the pot, you can pick any job you want inside the college. Wow. And if it doesn't exist, we'll find it for you." And I'm thinking to myself, I still don't know if I can do it, but I think I have to say yes. And I took the assistantship, and I got a very early master's degree in information security. And that set the tone for the rest of my career. Now, I was lucky. My medical issues were something that were resolvable with the right treatment. And so I was able to return to work. and I was able to return to grad school. And I worked in the video industry in Detroit doing cool things. And then I got into the dot-com boom and learned some lessons about what dot-com boom could fail in front of you. And then I got done with my grad program and I went off and happened to land a job at Purdue. Purdue's a great institution and I learned a lot.
The
But
university or the pharmaceutical company?
Purdue University.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm a Midwest kid. I will fully admit I'm a Midwest kid at heart. I was raised in cornfields and soybean fields in the middle of Illinois where there was, if you were on a pitcher's mound, you could see for miles because it was that flat. I spent 4 years at Purdue and I had this moment where I realized I hadn't interviewed anywhere in 4 years. And I was worried that that was going to become a rusty skill set. So I opened up my eyes and put out my feelers. And the University of Notre Dame had a position open. And it was a couple hours closer to my folks. I said, what the heck? And I threw a resume in, I got a call. And they said, why don't you come up and interview? And I drove up there. And you remember the days of MapQuest when you had a map about yay big?
Yeah, I remember.
I got there and the road on my map was gone. They had removed it from campus. And so my first interview question was, what do you do when the map ends here and the road doesn't go there anymore? So I sweated in my suit and I went and did my interview and they offered the job halfway through, which scares security people. You shouldn't never offer a security person a job halfway through. And I spent 12 years at Notre Dame. Never imagined it. I thought I was going to be there for 4. And every time something new came up that was interesting. And it became family and home. And there are people I love there and I miss them. But every time I think about my life, my story has been surprises and saying yes and finding it delightful and then building the connections.
That's wonderful. I think your story probably is like the majority of them that I hear. Very few of them, the person woke up one morning, finished elementary school, finished high school, went to college to get a degree in information technology and got the job the next day. Most people kind of bump and bang around until they end up where they are. And so I think that's very, very interesting and sounds like a very exciting time, you know, considering how many opportunities showed up for you. But here's a part of it that puzzles me, and it puzzles me in a way that may or may not make sense to you. So for people of color, those opportunities are almost never in existence, you know, where someone would hire you halfway through an interview, or someone would pay for you to go to school, or, you know, offer you any job on campus. The thousands of people I know, and, you know, probably it's a couple of 3,000 people I know, I cannot ever tell you one that's ever said what you said. Now, I've had lots of people tell me, you know, I went to work for X company. In fact, it was a white woman told me a story that was pretty much similar to yours, but with a few little different caveats. She said, I went to work for this company. The boss called me up out of the blue and said, hey, we've got another sector over here we're standing up. We'd like you to lead it. And she didn't have the skills or the qualifications to lead it, but she got the job, you know. And a part of these stories, what's really important for me is that, you know, like your story, and if you're white male, it's a very understandable, reasonable story. If you're white female, it's an attainable story, but it takes a little bit more work. Whereas a black, brown, whatever ethnicity you may be, that story is almost unbelievable. So as you grew in your career, did you ever stop or take a look back and say, wow, how did I get here? How did the stars line up for me?
You become aware of an innate privilege that you don't see. So growing up in the middle of Illinois, I went to a Catholic school that was essentially not a diverse Catholic school, right? You could name the people who didn't look like you, and it was a very small group. And then I moved to Michigan to a community that was intensely diverse and small town diverse. And you could have some of those conversations about the differences. Like, what is your experience like? You're in the class with me, but you are obviously having a different experience than I am. And what does that mean? And your friends, when you talk to them about that, will say, I have a different set of expectations that are applied to me. You know, I can't get an A in this class because then I will stand out, and that's not okay in my social group. And in your social group, it's expected you're going to try for the A because that's what you should do. And you start to think about the people that you know who should have those opportunities who may not, and how you share them, how you enable them, how you give back, how you talk to folks and say, have you thought about this? And you try and pay it forward. Because I know I've benefited from people giving me opportunities and believing in me. And so my job every day is to believe in the people around me and pay that forward because it multiplies. It's a thing that we all have responsibility for, and it can be so very daunting because you look and you go, happy accidents and these things have happened. How do I make those happen? How do I have somebody have a story like mine who is not me?
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is powerful.
That's what I think about. That's where I try to start from.
Absolutely. So in your staff, so you said you were the CIO.
Mm-hmm.
So in your staff and in the structure of your staff, how do you apply your lessons, which you learned over time? Not just about, offering opportunities to underserved communities, but more, your growth path, how you learn, how you adapt to the work that you do, what did you do when you had shortcomings? So in other words, if they threw you in the security part of IT, how did you learn all the gotchas and all of the, here are the things we do to make our university successful?
A lot of what I do that's really satisfying is mentoring. And a lot of people look at someone in a senior position and say, I want to do exactly what you did. And you and I both know that's a non-duplicable process. You can't do that. Not same time's not the same, person's not the same, none of that's the same. But you can talk about the concepts. And one of the things I say to people is saying yes is really good. And then you have to learn to say no, because you can give too much of yourself. But I'll encourage people to put themselves out there, right? So this is an opportunity to present or to get out there, and let's find somebody who might not otherwise get in front of a room and bring them with us and put them in front of the room with us. And then next time they take somebody and put them in front of the room, and we get that exposure, which helps us get the less represented people represented. When you have an organization like mine, one of the most important things is if you want to bring people in, you want them to be able to see themselves in your organization.
Absolutely.
And I don't want people to just see me. I don't want them to see a middle-aged white guy in an IT role. That is not the way we succeed. We're part of the success, but we shouldn't be the way we succeed. And I see those changes happening across time. So when I was a security practitioner on a daily basis, I was a security technologist and then a security leader. We would have a national conference for higher ed information security. And when I first started going, man, oh man, that was not a diverse conference overall. And I went for years, and you started to see people coming in across a variety of types of diverse spectrums. And when I last went a few years ago, after taking a break as I changed leadership roles, it was so different in terms of who was presenting and what they were talking about and what the rooms felt like from where it had been a decade before, that the change is visible. And that purposeful change had happened. It's not where it needs to be, but it was happening.
And I think we all could say that, and I have been very outspoken about this. I don't think we can say that at least the field that I work in, IT, is as less diverse as it was maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I worked with IBM and did IBM mainframe and all that stuff. I was almost always the only person that looks like me. Today, I am mostly in a leadership role. I am one of the few that looks like me in that space. But I think that what's really imperative in what we're doing is like something called trust, and it's the trust work relationship, right? Do I trust this relationship? And so in a lot of instances from Black and brown people I have talked to, and women also, I may get a job but am I going to be successful? So do I trust my boss? Do I trust my colleagues? There's so much undermining. I remember I had a gentleman work for me, a young white guy, brilliant. He knew everything about Apple. I think he might have invented Apple. He might have been there with Steve Jobs at the time. Steve was creating all this innovation, brilliant. But he was very, very secretive. He did not want to share his knowledge with anyone because he was so afraid of losing his job or losing his position. And I was really surprised to find that in a white man. I thought that was not, they were, self-confident, self-assured. They knew that everything and they had it. But when I heard him explain that to me, he said too many times he had been undermined and had to find his way back to a role where he was paid. And he was very much centered on being paid well. So his mindset was, I can't share this with anyone. And it leads you to this place where when you hire diverse candidates into organizations, where are they safe? Where are the places that they feel they can grow? So like, how many of them are going to stand up and make a suggestion in front of a room full of people and say, hey, I think we should do this. And I'll give you an example. This was an Asian man. We were sitting in a room, all the suits and ties and all the muckety mucks. I'm the only Black woman in the room, and he's an Asian man. And this is probably 10 years ago. He raised his hand and he says, I think we should consider computer encryption. Everybody in the room looked at him, looked at me, looked back at each other. And it was almost as if he said nothing, but basically we're not doing that. And so then he became gun shy. So he wasn't going to stand up and suggest something. Well, maybe 5 or 6 years later, we were encrypting everything. We were encrypting left and right, but he said it. And the CISO from American University told us a story. She had come to Duke and given a talk. And she came and she said, there's this word that she's found in her work called HEP, right? So she can, in her meeting, suggest that we do something. We set up a honeypot. We do whatever it is we do this. We put monitoring software in place, and it would just be silence. She said then one of her male colleagues sitting next to her would pipe up and say, I think monitoring or, creating these new divergent security systems would be a great idea. Everybody started clapping and whistling. Oh, what a great idea. That is just, she just said that. And she said her word was HEP. It isn't a thing until a man says it. And I think that in a lot of instances, we find that to be the case, where you're almost gun shy because no one's going to take you serious. If what your work is at Miami University is that you are empowering people to feel bold enough to step out there without there being retribution, without there being penalty or punitive, or it's not so onerous for making a mistake, allow people to make a mistake, and a lot of the work that I do, I talk about social capital, right? So you said mentor. So I stay away from that word. Mentor reminds me of dating, right? So you got to find the right mentor to mentor me or to mentor you or whatever you got to, but advocate, right? So if you've got an employee who you see, this employee is smart, they're doing their jobs, but they really outgrown this job. They've outgrown this job. Would you pick up the phone and call one of your colleagues at the University of Miami and say, hey, I've got this guy or girl over here, exceptional. I think she needs an opportunity to grow. And to me, that's the difference between mentoring and advocating. So if you mentor, it just means you're a good resource. I can come sound my ideas off you. I can explain to you when my boss is making me want to pull all my hair out, or I've just had a bad day. So then my mentor, I can come do that. But my advocate, the person who's going to see me and say, hey, there's Rochelle over there. Let me help her. Let me take it to the next step because I know enough about her to know she's a hard worker. She's smart. She's going to get the work done. And to me, in the relationships, especially when you're in leadership roles, the language that we use and the way we encourage people really lead to both successes, yours and theirs. Because if you become truly an advocate, you become an advocate for many, because people will then start coming, even if I've got a problem, I'm here at this job, I want to stay here forever, but I know if I go talk to David, he'll help me work through this issue. And that's really a hard thing to navigate because for many of us, especially if we're underrepresented, we don't know where the safe places are, where that trust work relationship is.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said advocate, because I think there's a path through this relationship building, right? Because it's relationship building. And most of these relationships, you usually start it with a purpose. You frequently become friends through the path. And over time, people that you have worked with before may be supporting you later in your career, right? It shifts and has nuance to it. but you're right. It's how do you get people to be supported to their next step, to their next role, or through their life? Because it's not just about work, it's about the whole person. And so you learn them and you support them. One of the things I think is really powerful is talking openly about how you're making decisions about your own career in life. And so that people aren't thinking, if I come talk to you, I'm going to be scared to, I'm looking somewhere else, you're fired. No, I'm looking somewhere else. Well, tell me what you're looking. I'd like to keep you.
Exactly.
Is it you need something else internally? Is it you need something to go somewhere else? You have a family reason you need to move? All of these are okay, but it should be okay to have those conversations, and it should be okay to not feel like those are dangerous.
Absolutely.
And then you can say, I've got a problem. I'm worried about this. I'm not okay today. That space is important. So I've got 3 rules that I tell people, if you want to work with me, these are my 3 rules. And you've covered 2 of them already without me saying it. The first rule for me is do the right thing. And people say, well, how do I know what the right thing is? I say, you'll know if it's the right thing. Because if you're thinking about it and you're not sure, it's probably not the right thing. And they said, well, what if we don't agree on the right thing? I said, we'll talk later one-on-one, and I'll ask you to explain. And I'll back you in public, and I'll ask to understand in private, because that's important.
Absolutely.
My second thing I tell people is mistakes are okay.
Absolutely.
And you cover both of these, right? Mistakes are okay. Now, if you make the same mistake over and over, I reserve the right to come ask about that too. And my third thing, this is me. This is a very David thing. I tell people fun is important, and having fun at work is a key part of what we do. And if we do those 3 things, we're almost always going to be an effective and efficient organization, and people will feel good. And those 3 simple things guide me through my work and my relationships and all of those elements.
Right. And we can learn a lot from those big tech companies, because they have put a lot of money in employee wellness, and not necessarily mental health or going to the doctor. But, when you're like where we are right now, so majority of us are staring at a screen 6 to 8 hours a day, if not longer. And in about a year from now, if we do return to some other kind of normalcy, is the employer going to consider your eyes? Are we going to set up a screen to have eye checks to see how much damage has been done to your eyes? Right. There's that part right there. So employee wellness, psychologically safe at work. So what you described is, good scenario is, you got a colleague working right next to you. You're working on the same project or product or whatever it is. And the person has these comments and things that they say. And for women, for a while, it was harassment, right? So you look nice in that dress, or you smell nice, or I love the way you did your hair. Those little subtle comments that make people feel uncomfortable. Well, where we are now, they're easier, why do you care about Black Lives Matter? Don't you think that all lives matter? That's what those subtle comments that kind of undermine people, like, or, why do you have your hair in braids? Or, whatever it is, the to know where I can go in that situation, to know where I'm safe, to know that this is okay. And safe is not just with my colleagues, but safe goes all the way up. And so a lot of organizations say, well, you can come talk to the leadership team, you can come talk to the president, but literally they've penciled you into a time on the calendar. You got 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, you're out, and whatever it is. And, do they follow up or circle back to see if they resolve the issue, if the issue is gone? And I think that, a lot of talk about psychological safety is talked in today's world, but I think that very few people know what that is, especially for people who are marginalized just in society as it is. I think what you described as your 3 tenets are very, very nice and very good. I probably could add 5 or 6 more to it, but I think the very foundation of what you just said makes perfectly good sense, because at the end of the day, you are a resource I can come to. If I work for you, I'd be like, okay, that's a resource I can come to. And if I had a problem with your favorite employee, i.e. the person that's always in your office, you play golf with on Saturday, you go out and have ping pong and have a drink with, if I have a problem with that person, the way you respond to me about, yes, hey, I like David, he's a really, really great guy, but we're all human, we make mistakes. So, if you and I can talk through this, I'm not going to hold my relationship with David, or I'm not going to tell David what you said. We're going to talk about this just between you and I. And if I can find some common ground between the two of you, I will bring the two of you together and we'll go play golf on Saturday, or we'll go have coffee or a beer or something, in a way that resolves a problem. One, it reestablishes trust in you. So he reaffirms that I know I can trust David. He's asked your permission. You've asked his permission before you involve this other person. And so he knows that you're not just going to be talking about him behind his back. And I think that people need to understand turnover in the workplace more times than not has to do with the relationships they have with people, not the work. If you had your employees work from 8 to 8 every single day and you had them out there picking up grains of rice, as long as they felt good about that, they knew that you were supportive. Every once in a while you come up and pick up grain and rice. But the problem is we don't manage the relationships we have with people well enough for people to be successful and to retain their knowledge, their institutional knowledge in that institute before they go look somewhere else. Because at some point, the pot's going to boil over and I just got to go. And so I think that's a very, very helpful thing to do. I want to ask you this question, and I'm going to use myself as the guinea pig in this case. So I have been in IT since I was 17 years old, and I'm 19 right now. Just turned 19 a couple of hours ago. 19, David, you got it? 19, 17, 19, got it, 19. Anyway, in my career, I have never, well, I take that back, maybe my first, second, some job, someone hired me, but I have never applied for a job. In other words, I've never put my name down on a piece of paper and say, hey, I want to work here, or you had a job opening, I'd like to apply for it. Typically what it is someone refers me or someone reaches out to me. And I find that I have better opportunities or better success in those cases. When you have to apply and go through the system, the HR system, the keywords, now we have ATS, application tracking systems, and all of these different things, the likelihood of people with, I don't even know, disparities may not be the right word, but have little concerns, right? So their resume, all the words weren't spelled correctly. They went to a college somewhere no one has ever heard of, or a historically Black college. They have, vacancies between jobs, right? So they started working for company A, and for a year and a half, they were out of a job and all that stuff. People typically don't make it through that process because the process has already decided what it wants, and it's looking for a very straight, narrow algorithm that matches all the key buttons. How do you work around hiring when you have to go through an HR system that may or may not have the same values as you do?
First thing is you have to define those values, right? And make sure that you've got your team, your hiring managers bought into what those values are. And that's a balance between institutional needs and making sure that you're creating that future that you want to have. And that future is the broad set of people that you can hire, because it's going to be better that way. So one of the things I like to do is I like to look at position descriptions and take out as many barriers as you can. Now, that's not always a fast process. Institutions turn like battleships, right? You got to turn it a little bit at a time, but eventually you get there. And so first thing I will ask people is that a requirement, or is that a nice to have? And can we remove more of the requirements and have more of the nice to have, so that we get more people that we can talk to? Because you discover treasures when you do that, right? You see people you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And then in parallel, I want to look at how I'm getting people in, right? I want to show up in places we've never shown up before and say, we are interested in hiring you. And for Miami, we're going to say, we want to hire really awesome people, and we want you to come have a Miami experience. And so we're trying to get out to places that are beyond the normal Midwest college locations. And then you have to make sure that your interview teams are interviewing in a way that supports that, right? So people might have a non-traditional background. Well, can you hire for potential instead of fixed skills? Can we make a call to a reference and say, what is this person actually like, right? I hired a gentleman a few years ago, and I had the most amazing 3 reference calls that I've ever had. And they said, the man that you are calling about is quiet. And when he speaks, you must listen, because he is the wisest person when he gets around to speaking. And I hired him because all of his references agreed. He was a quiet man. And he had so much wisdom. He changed our entire organization because people learned that when he spoke up, we should do what he was saying. And so I want to have those experiences where I hire someone because they have that potential, where they can grow. And I think higher ed's really cool because we see potential in people and we know that it will grow and they will surpass us. And that is the best thing we can do. And we have to remind ourselves of that constantly because it can be a little intimidating when somebody goes running past you sometimes, but it makes you feel whole when you get there and think about what you did. And so putting those together, it's a slow process, but over 4 or 5 years, your organization starts to change and the faces in your organization change and the way you're hiring changes. And that value gets seen. And you make a couple of those hires and they prove out and they keep doing it and it becomes a different place.
Absolutely. I would add that, regardless of whether you're hiring entry-level programmer to the CIO or whatever, if you bring the diversity into the room, and what I mean by diversity, bring people into the room that have not years of experience working with this, not years of understanding how this process is, but the newest, least knowledgeable person, because that person hasn't gotten all the battle scars, right, from what you've learned over time. This person hasn't, so they're going to bring an insight that's a fresh insight. I think another part of it is bringing people who have nothing to do with the position, right? So I always tell people, not HR and not accounting. The finance people and the HR people are going to be very scrutinized very hard. But if you bring someone from the sales department, or you bring somebody from the food services department, and let you get a very diverse set of actions. And I'll use an analogy that I have talked about for years. If you think about the instance of hiring a chef, so typically when you hire a chef, the first thing they do is ask the person to cook something. Can you cook, right? Because we can all feel, all of us can boil water to some degree. There are some people I know still don't know how to boil water, but for the most part, we can boil water. So can you cook? Yes, I can boil water. You don't say that, but that's what you're thinking in the back of your mind. And then you think about, they ask you, well, what's your best dish? Water with potatoes in it. I'm still boiling water, right? I'm still boiling water, right? So, but I'm forming the answers that work for me because this is the way I understand it without giving away too much. Whereas the person who's listening to this is hearing, that person only knows how to boil water and potatoes, right? So if you consider the analogy of how much time we spend verifying somebody is who they say they are versus testing who they say they are, because most companies get 90 days to find out whether that person is good enough.
Exactly.
So if somebody else on the line that you had that you wanted to hire, you should have hired that person, or you should have told that person, hey, we're going to interview somebody for a period of time. Maybe keep your resume, but we'll get back to you. But typically what we do is we hire the boiling water and potatoes guy, and we dismiss the guy who could make filet mignon with, asparagus and, all that other good stuff. We let him go because he just didn't fit the right mold as we saw it, because we're not a steak restaurant. We are a potatoes restaurant. So, we let him go. And now you've got the guy who can, but all he can do is boil water and potatoes. That's literally all he can do. Whereas this guy over here, although his specialty is steak and asparagus, he might be able to boil water and potatoes and make you something phenomenal. And I think that when you consider, how we evaluate people, whether, our interview team or whether our hiring, job description or all our processes, I think that we get to a point where we actually skew the results to a result that we don't want, because we're so busy making it perfect, right? So you look at a job and this page is long: skills, requirements, preferred, required. What? You need a couple of paragraphs. If the person has to have a college degree, that's easy. You wrap that into job description. You can say college degree, cook. That's all you have to do. You haven't got to go no further. Now, if you want them to come from Ivy League, you put an Ivy League college degree cook, but you need a cook. But literally, what is the person going to do every day? Every single day? All these other desired skills, every time I hire somebody, I have so many things I want that person to do. Besides walk on water and part the Red Seas, I also want them to move the stars around in the heaven. I want them to stop the rain from falling on days when the weather is cool. All of these things. But what I really need is someone who understands the weather, period. That's all I need, but I want all these. And so when you add all these layers to what a person can or cannot do, or you want a person to can, I think you eliminate good candidates. And then the last thing I'll say about that is a lot of institutions rarely start their recruiting in places where marginalized people are found, right? So whether you are participating with a high school tutoring or internship program, historically Black college, a small private college, whatever it is, we are limiting the people we get in our pool because we're going to the same places all the time. And when you think about that, everybody else is going to that same pool. So what's in that pool? But if you divert yourself to other pools where there are other people, you might find yourself a gem.
And it's so hard to hire in IT right now, right? It's a highly competitive market.
Highly competitive.
So, in our case, we're calling down to our friends in Cincinnati and saying, tell us about your high school programs, right? How are people coming out of those programs? What are the retraining programs looking like that are training developers? How do I get read into those? And as we start to come back a little bit more face to face, there's going to be more opportunities to go and take a Miami banner and plant it at a thing and say, come talk to us, right? We don't even care if you talk to us today. We want you to see the logo and think about the potential and think about us in the future. And maybe when the moment is there, you'll call us or you'll email us and you'll say, what's a Miami job look like? And we'll say, here's what we're doing. But I liked what you said because you were talking about the difference between fixed skill set and potential.
Right.
And I think potential, sometimes you need fixed skill set. You have to crank the handle, and the handle has to be cranked every day. Absolutely. And every organization needs a certain amount of that to make sure things happen. But you want a decent number of people who are going to just completely blow you out of the water because you hired the chef who knows how to make filet, and they'll boil water, but they're going to say, did you know we could industrialize this and automate it? And I don't ever want to do this again. Right. So here's how it works without me.
Absolutely.
I tell people I want to hire for the right kind of lazy. I want to hire people who only want to do things once and do it right so they never have to do it again. And if I can hire that person, I'll be happy as well. One thing that you might appreciate is a hiring technique and an interview technique that I did with my security team for years. We would ask people to draw us a highly technical information security diagram. We'd say, draw us a 3-tier web server architecture. And we'd hand them a whiteboard marker and we'd say, draw it for us. We didn't care if they could draw that architecture. We cared how they talked to the room about what they were drawing. And we cared about the questions they asked, and we would interact with them. We had people who, when we handed them a marker, would sit down. And we'd say, well, we got a problem because we really need to hire people who can actually talk to folks. Because at that point in time, security people, our job was to build bridges and to enable things. And if you couldn't walk into a room and talk to people, we weren't going to be able to win what we needed to win to make things better. And I had people who came back for an interview 2 or 3 times, internal candidates, and every time we had them a marker, they'd sit back down like, you were here last time. So well, it's a complex thing, and it takes work, and you get it wrong, and you learn, and you try it a bit different. You get it wrong, you keep working on it, you get a little writer, and eventually you're succeeding and say, okay, how did we do that? Let's do that again. But it's so worth doing.
Yeah, I would challenge your, you need to have the fixed skills. So I would take you back to the history or the founding of America. There's a television show that comes on the History Channel called The Men That Made America or Founded America. So I can't remember exactly the exact title of it, but it shows you all these people who start out with a very small idea. And they ran into obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Every time they encountered that obstacle, they got better. And the good example of that is Tesla, right? So people think of Tesla and they think of the car. Really why you should think of Tesla is because of AC power. Without Tesla, we wouldn't have AC. We'd be still running on DC power, which is what Edison said. So the person who was hiring for an electrician would have hired Edison. Yeah. Every single time, world-renowned, experience, got a lofty background of accomplishment. But Tesla was up and coming. He had some ideas. He was given an opportunity to explore his ideas and to go further. And I think that a lot of times when we hire these fixed skills, so especially in security, so security is one of those things. We don't want our universities to go dark. We don't want ransomware. We don't want any of that. So we need to understand all the pieces and parts. We need somebody who can manage and govern that. But if you imagine a raw kid, like just out of college, maybe even not out of college, high school, who has this interest in technology and hacking and ransomware and phishing and all the things that's out there. And he just needs an opportunity. Mm-hmm. If you look at what the federal government, the FBI does when they catch one of these young people who are hackers, they turn them into consultants.
Yep.
because they find out that this person has enough wherewithal, where if that person would have applied, that hacker would have applied for a job for the FBI, they would have never made it to the front door. They would have never gotten past the shredder. But the fact that they went out and demonstrated what they were able to do, and I think in a lot of cases, especially for underrepresented groups, and I'm including brown, black, and women in those spaces, they don't get those opportunities to show what their potential is. And I would ask you, when you first started, were you the star that you are today? Probably not. You grew into that star.
Absolutely.
People need to be able to grow into their star. And in a way, you do that successfully. So if you've got your fixer employee who knows everything there's to know about security, bring somebody in from the security group or the programming group or wherever, and let him shadow that person around. You know, we used to have a word for that, co-working, but I guess we moved away from that because that wasn't in fashion anymore. But ways to give people opportunities to grow and to say, you know, you work with me on this, you do the work, and I'm going to stand over your shoulder and watch what you do, you know, because your guy with the marker who would not mark, I would say a good part of that is probably the fear of failure. I don't want you to see me in this room screw up. I probably could do this, but I don't want to. And a lot of times that is almost the driver of why people fail, because they don't want to fail. And when you don't want to fail, you're in the most inevitably writing on your back, I want to fail, or I'm going.
The question becomes, how do you invest in folks, right? So the first thing I say is, are you willing to raise your hand and say, I'm interested? That's a really good one. And then if we come spend some time with you, are you willing to continue investing with us to do this, right? So whether it's job shadowing or rotation, or I like crossover meetings. I like to invite somebody from another division into a team meeting and make them one of us, right? And say, welcome to our family. This is what we're like. Do you want to come to Thanksgiving dinner with us? And that will change over time. It's a great thing, and higher ed's not, again, nice because we have students, right? And you can find those students and you can say, come try it out. And it's low risk for both of us. And a bunch of them launch in really amazing ways. And you got to watch them, you know, as you said, not a star then moving forward to a star, you got to watch that. And that's really satisfying. I do feel like I should offer some nuance on the fixed skills. What I mostly mean is that there are times where you have to accomplish a specific task and you have to accomplish it then. So you will hire because you got to get that done. But that's if you're running your whole organization that way. You just bought a bunch of, you know, people who can probably grow, but they may or may not want to. You make those decisions. You have to make sure you're making them for the right reasons. And then I encourage, like, hire for potential, because people will go way past if you give them the space.
Absolutely. And when you hire a hired gun, you have to remember you just hired a hired gun, because like right now in IT security, cybersecurity, it is a very highly paid, highly demanded job. And people are talking to these people all the time. Like my staff would always tell me, you know, I just got a call from a recruiter. He's willing to pay me $130,000 if I start tomorrow, or $180,000 if I can start, you know, and I can't do, you know, like in higher education, money is not falling off the tree like that. Maybe in the private sector, that's the case, but not in. So, you know, you're figuring out how to do this. I would just say, and I agree with everything you said. I think you do need the person who can keep the ship afloat. The problem just is that person who's keeping the ship afloat is going to eventually leave, and you're going to have to find somebody else to get the ship afloat. And if you bring those people who are less senior in, one, you save a little bit of money budgetarily, but two, you get a person who's grown from the grass up and they know all the gotchas, you know, so they can step in there and go from there. I want to thank you so much, David, for talking to me. We are running out of time, so I want to give you the last 5 minutes to say anything we didn't cover. And as I said to you earlier, as soon as the video converts, I'll send you a link and have a look and let me know if I may upload it.
Absolutely. I have one question for you, having watched quite a few of your videos over the past couple of weeks. You've been doing this for almost a year, and it feels like these conversations have probably changed you in interesting ways. What change sticks out in your mind about what the videos have done for you as an individual after you've done so much for other people in these conversations?
They're extremely painful. They hurt. I think I leave with a sense of sadness, some of them that I hear, you know, but I feel good doing them. Like, you know, I don't know if I told you this or you knew this about me. So back last year, July 14th, Duke Law eliminated my position in a 10-minute Zoom call. They called me up on the phone. They said, hey, we're getting rid of your position. You got 60 days to find a job at Duke. or else bye. This is the middle of the pandemic. Everybody I knew had gone on a hiring freeze, but I had great relationships with people across Duke. And so the next day I had a job. So that was really easy. But my story is not unique. I hear from someone every day. I had a woman send me a Teams message yesterday. She said, I am so done with Duke. I cannot take any more of this racist behavior at Duke. And so you walk the person down off the limb, you know, you try to get them back. Okay, so who do we need to talk to? What do we need to do? What's the issue? Try to get it through. And so for me, being able to help people is everything to me. My mother died on May 7th. My whole family lives in New York. I live in North Carolina. I did not leave North Carolina. I Zoomed in to see the burial because someone needed me. And when I needed, it's like, because I had no one, you know, there has been no person in my career that has stood up for me or been my advocate and say, hey, Rochelle, let me help you, or what's going on with you, or whatever it is. So to me, if God has afforded me that opportunity, I'm happy to do it. So helping people is what I've gotten most out of it.
I'm really sorry to hear about your mother because I know how hard that is during the pandemic. And I absolutely salute you for being that person and stepping up this way. The back catalog and the stories are just great. And it's really neat to see this happening. And just, I want to say thank you. It's fun to be here today. It's fun to get to talk to you, meet someone new and hear some stories and share. So thank you.
As I hope you listened to the Notre Dame talk. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but one of your former colleagues at Notre Dame talked to me. I think I talked to the president, or it was the interim CIO. That's who it was, the interim CIO also, because he was leaving or something. I don't know, but I am glad you're in the Midwest. I will tell you, I have been to Ohio 2 or 3 times, but it's one of my favorite places. I love coming to Ohio. So it's very, very nice. And if I ever come to Ohio, I'll come looking for you to find out where you are.
I will hold you to that. Come swing through. It's a beautiful campus. I'd love to give you a tour and sit down for coffee and continue the conversation.
Absolutely. And, you know, as you're looking to hire people, please, I help people find jobs every day. So if you've got something you're looking for, please reach out and let me know.
Will do. Thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you. I hope you have a great day and a great long weekend. You know, Monday is a holiday. A lot of people don't seem to remember that.
I almost forgotten. I had to look at my calendar.
Yeah, Monday is a holiday. So have a great long weekend. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Newton. Take care.
You too. Bye.